Hi, I'm Rachel. 3 months ago, my brother Kevin looked me dead in the eye at our family barbecue and said, "Face it, Rachel, you'll never be successful. Some people just aren't built for it." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just nodded and walked away. But yesterday morning, I got a call that changed everything. The voice on the other end said, "Ms. Martinez, this is Michael Thompson from Henderson Associates. I'm calling to formally offer you the position of Regional Director of Digital Strategy, the same company where Kevin's wife Stephanie has been climbing the corporate ladder for 5 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." The Arizona heat was brutal that Saturday afternoon, but nothing compared to the burning sensation in my chest as I stood in my parents' backyard in Scottsdale, watching Kevin flip burgers like he owned the world. He'd just closed another real estate deal that week, his third big commission in 2 months. And the way he talked about it, you'd think he'd invented the concept of selling houses. Stephanie was perched on the patio furniture, scrolling through her phone with that practiced corporate smile she'd perfected since landing her marketing coordinator position at Henderson Associates. She kept mentioning her upcoming presentation to the regional team, dropping hints about a potential promotion like breadcrumbs for the rest of us to follow. My parents hung on every word, nodding and making impressed sounds at all the right moments. I sat at the far end of the table, nursing a lukewarm Diet Coke and trying to look interested in conversations that never seemed to include me. This had become my default position at family gatherings over the past 2 years, ever since I'd graduated with my marketing degree and struggled to find steady work. While Kevin was closing 6-figure deals and Stephanie was networking her way up the corporate ladder, I was bouncing between freelance gigs and part-time retail jobs, barely scraping together enough to cover my rent on a tiny studio apartment in Tempe. The conversation shifted when my dad asked about my latest job search. I'd been dreading this moment all afternoon, knowing it would come up eventually. Robert Martinez had a way of asking questions that sounded supportive but felt like interrogations, especially when Kevin was around to provide contrast. "Any luck with those applications, mija?" Dad asked, his tone careful but loaded with expectation. I shifted in my plastic chair, feeling the familiar weight of disappointment settling over the table. Still waiting to hear back from a few places. The marketing field is pretty competitive right now. Kevin let out a short laugh, the kind that starts in the throat and never quite reaches genuine amusement. "Competitive?" He flipped a burger, with more force than necessary. "Rachel, you've been saying that for 2 years. Maybe it's time to consider that the problem isn't the market." The words hung in the desert air like smoke. My mother, Linda, made a soft tisking sound, but she didn't disagree. Stephanie looked up from her phone, eyebrows raised in that way people do when they smell drama brewing. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, though I already knew where this was heading. Kevin set down his spatula and turned to face me fully. He had this way of standing when he was about to make a point, shoulders back, chest out, like he was posing for a real estate headshot. "I mean, maybe you're aiming too high. Not everyone is cut out for corporate success. There's nothing wrong with accepting your limitations." The barbecue sauce on my plate suddenly became very interesting. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for my response. This was how it always went with Kevin. He'd make these pronouncements disguised as helpful advice, and I'd either defend myself and look desperate or stay quiet and look defeated. Today felt different, though. Today, the quiet option seemed like the only one that wouldn't end with me crying in my car in their driveway. "I'm just saying," Kevin continued, warming up to his theme, "some people are natural entrepreneurs, natural salespeople. They have that drive, that instinct for success. And others." He gestured vaguely in my direction. "Others are better, suited for supporting roles. There's honor in that." Stephanie nodded along, adding her own commentary. "It's like at Henderson Associates. We have our high performers, our leaders, and then we have our solid team players who keep things running. Both are important, but they're completely different types of people. The way she said team players made it sound like a consolation prize. I knew she didn't mean it maliciously. Stephanie wasn't cruel, just thoughtlessly confident in her own trajectory. But hearing my career prospects reduced to supporting role while she casually name-dropped her company felt like a small knife twist. Maybe Rachel could apply to be an assistant somewhere, my mother suggested helpfully. Those positions are always available, and they're perfect for people who aren't sure what they want to do. That's when Kevin delivered the line that would echo in my head for months afterward. He walked over to the table, hands still smelling like charcoal and meat, and looked down at me with what I can only describe as pity mixed with brotherly concern. Face it, Rachel. You'll never be successful. Some people just aren't built for it. He paused, letting the words sink in. And that's okay. Not everyone can be a leader. The world needs followers, too. The silence that followed felt enormous. I could hear the neighbor's dog barking 3 houses down, the distant hum of the freeway, the sizzle of meat on the grill. My parents didn't contradict him. Stephanie didn't jump to my defense. Nobody did. I nodded. Just once, a small movement that acknowledged I'd heard him. Then I stood up, grabbed my purse, and walked toward the side gate that led to the front of the house. "Where are you going?" my mother called after me. "Home," I said without turning around. "Thanks for lunch." I didn't slam the gate. I didn't peel out of their driveway. I just drove the 20-minute route back to my apartment in complete silence. Kevin's words playing on repeat. Some people just aren't built for it. The world needs followers, too. You'll never be successful. My studio apartment felt smaller than usual when I walked in. It was one of those converted spaces that real estate ads generously called cozy, but was really just a glorified hotel room with a kitchenette. The Murphy bed was still pulled down from the night before. Unmade sheets tangled from another restless night spent wondering what I was doing wrong with my life. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my laptop, closed on the small desk. That doubled as my dining table and office space. 3 job applications sat in my drafts folder, each one carefully crafted, each one destined to join the growing pile of polite rejections in my email. Maybe Kevin was right. Maybe I was aiming too high, expecting too much, deluding myself about my own capabilities. The afternoon stretched ahead of me, empty and suffocating. I could hear my upstairs neighbor moving around, probably getting ready for a Saturday night out with friends. Through my single window, I could see other people my age loading up cars for weekend adventures, carrying beach chairs and coolers, laughing about things I couldn't hear. I thought about calling Jessica Chen, my one remaining friend from college who still lived in Phoenix. Jessica worked at a nonprofit downtown and always had stories about meaningful projects and office dynamics that sounded like episodes of a workplace comedy. But the thought of explaining what had happened at the barbecue, of hearing myself repeat Kevin's words out loud, made my throat close up. Instead, I opened my laptop and did what I always did when the world felt too big and too small at the same time. I scrolled through LinkedIn, watching other people my age announce promotions and new positions, sharing photos from company retreats and industry conferences. Their success stories read like fiction to me. These tales of networking and opportunity that seemed to happen to everyone except me. That's when I saw it. A post from Henderson Associates, Stephanie's company, announcing their expansion into new digital markets. They were looking for innovative strategies to reach younger demographics, planning to hire several new team members over the next quarter. The post included buzzwords I knew by heart: social media strategy, content marketing, brand development, digital analytics. These weren't just concepts I'd studied in school. They were things I'd been doing freelance for small businesses around Phoenix, building Instagram presences and creating content calendars for local restaurants and boutiques. The work was sporadic and didn't pay much, but it was work I actually enjoyed. Work that felt natural to me in ways that traditional job interviews never did. I stared at the post for a long time, Kevin's voice echoing in my head. You'll never be successful. Some people just aren't built for it. But underneath his dismissal, I could hear something else. Mrs. Helen Rodriguez, my high school business teacher, had pulled me aside senior year and said something I'd almost forgotten. Rachel, you have an eye for this stuff that can't be taught. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Don't let anyone convince you that quiet confidence isn't a form of strength. Mrs. Rodriguez had been the first person to notice that I understood social media marketing intuitively, that I could look at a brand's online presence and immediately see what was working and what wasn't. She'd encouraged me to pursue marketing in college, even helped me write my application essays. I'd lost touch with her after graduation, but her words had stuck with me through 4 years of study and 2 years of struggle. As the sun set over Phoenix, casting long shadows through my single window, I made a decision that felt both impulsive and inevitable. I wasn't going to apply to Henderson Associates through their normal channels. I wasn't going to submit my resume to some HR portal and wait for another polite rejection. Instead, I was going to do something that would either prove Kevin right about my limitations or prove him spectacularly wrong. I was going to show them what I could do. The plan that formed in my mind over the next few hours was simple, but risky. I would spend the following week creating a complete digital marketing strategy for Henderson Associates, a comprehensive proposal that demonstrated exactly what they needed to reach their expansion goals. I would research their current clients, analyze their online presence, identify gaps in their strategy, and present solutions that were so obviously valuable they couldn't ignore them. It was the kind of bold move that Kevin would never make. Too subtle for his direct sales approach, too unconventional for someone who believed success meant following established paths. But it felt right to me in a way that traditional job applications never had. I spent that evening cleaning my apartment, organizing my workspace, and making lists of everything I would need to research. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I had a clear sense of direction, not because someone had given me advice or opened a door, but because I'd finally stopped waiting for permission to show what I was capable of. As I pulled the Murphy bed back into the wall and transformed my living space into a proper office, I thought about Kevin's words one more time. You'll never be successful. Some people just aren't built for it. Tomorrow, I would start building something that would prove him wrong, not through argument or confrontation, but through the kind of quiet, methodical work that had always felt most natural to me. The world needs followers too, he'd said. But maybe what the world really needed was someone who understood that leadership didn't always look like standing at a barbecue grill, making pronouncements about other people's limitations. Maybe sometimes it looked like a woman in a studio apartment, rolling up her sleeves and getting to work. Monday morning arrived with the kind of oppressive Phoenix heat that makes you question your life choices before you're fully awake. I'd spent most of Sunday researching Henderson Associates, diving deep into their client roster, social media presence, and recent press releases. What I found was both encouraging and alarming. The company was clearly successful, with an impressive list of mid-sized businesses and several Fortune 500 accounts, but their digital strategy was stuck somewhere around 2019. Their Instagram looked like it was managed by someone's well-meaning aunt, with stock photos of handshakes and motivational quotes in Comic Sans font. Their LinkedIn content was purely promotional, with no engagement strategy or community building. Most telling of all, their website's blog hadn't been updated in 8 months, and the last post was titled, Why Email Marketing Still Works in Taobi Yao, the Digital Age. I made coffee in my tiny kitchenette and spread my research across the desk, feeling that familiar surge of energy that came when I spotted problems I knew how to solve. This was where Kevin and I differed fundamentally. He saw opportunity in what was already working and tried to replicate it. I saw potential in what was broken and figured out how to fix it. By Tuesday afternoon, I had identified 17 specific areas where Henderson Associates was leaving money on the table with their current digital approach. Their competitors were eating their lunch on TikTok and YouTube, platforms where Henderson had zero presence. Their email campaigns had open rates that would make a nonprofit fundraiser weep. Most critically, they were completely missing the boat on video content, which was becoming essential for B2B marketing in their industry. I spent Wednesday creating mock-ups of what their social media could look like with proper strategy behind it. Using Canva and some basic video editing software I'd learned for my freelance work, I designed a month's worth of content that maintained their professional brand while actually engaging with their target audience. The difference was stark. Where their current posts got maybe a dozen likes and no comments, similar content I'd created for smaller clients was driving real engagement and measurable leads. Thursday was when everything started to unravel. I was sitting in the Starbucks on Mill Avenue, the one with decent Wi-Fi and enough ambient noise to help me concentrate, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's number, which was unusual for a weekday afternoon. Linda Martinez was a creature of habit, and her calls typically came on Sunday evenings or during her lunch break on Fridays. "Mija, we need to talk," she said. Without preamble, her voice carrying that particular strain that meant family drama was brewing. "What's wrong?" I asked, saving my work and closing my laptop. "It's about Kevin and Stephanie. They're going through some things right now, and your father and I think it would be better if you didn't contact them for a while." I felt my stomach drop. What kind of things? What happened? There was a long pause, filled with the hiss of espresso machines and the chatter of college students around me. "Kevin's been having some troubles with his real estate business. The market's been tough, and he's under a lot of stress. And Stephanie, well, she's been working so hard at her company that she's completely exhausted." The careful way my mother was choosing her words told me there was more to the story. "Mom, what aren't you telling me? Kevin thinks that maybe what happened at the barbecue last weekend upset you more than you let on. He's worried that if you're angry with him, it might affect his relationship with Stephanie, and she can't handle any additional stress right now." I stared at the half-empty coffee cup in front of me, trying to process what I was hearing. He's worried that I might affect his marriage because of something he said to me? You know how Kevin gets when he's under pressure. He says things he doesn't mean, but Stephanie's been talking about how important family harmony is for her, mental health, and with everything she's dealing with at work. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, but I stopped listening somewhere around the part where my mother explained that Kevin had asked the family to give Rachel some space to process her feelings, and that maybe it would be better if I skipped the next few family gatherings until things settled down. I was being uninvited from my own family because my brother was afraid his wife might be stressed by his treatment of me. After hanging up, I sat in that Starbucks for another hour, staring at my laptop screen without seeing it. The Henderson Associates project that had felt so important, so full of potential, suddenly seemed like a pathetic delusion. What was I doing? Creating elaborate marketing strategies for a company that would never hire me, while my own family was coordinating efforts to avoid me? That evening, I called Jessica Chen. We'd known each other since freshman year at ASU, bonded over late-night study sessions, and a shared love of true crime podcasts. Jessica had always been the steady one, the friend who remembered birthdays, and checked in during finals week. If anyone would give me an honest assessment of whether I was losing my mind, it would be her. "They uninvited you from family dinner?" Jessica's voice carried a mix of disbelief and indignation that was oddly comforting. "Essentially, yes. My mom made it sound like I was being dramatic about what Kevin said, and now Stephanie needs protection from my potential negativity." "Rachel, that's insane. You literally just sat there and took it when Kevin was being a complete ass to you. How is that dramatic?" I was curled up on my Murphy bed, which I'd pulled down after giving up on productivity for the day. Maybe, he's right though. Maybe I am being dramatic. Maybe I am aiming too high and need to accept my limitations. Stop, Jessica said firmly. Do not let them gaslight you into thinking this is normal. You know what your problem is? You're too nice. You let people walk all over you and then wonder why they keep doing it. I'm not too nice. I'm just realistic about my situation. Bullshit. You want to know what's realistic? You're one of the smartest people I know. You have skills that companies desperately need, and you've been sabotaging yourself by playing small because your family can't handle your success. Jessica had a way of cutting through emotional clutter that was both helpful and uncomfortable. What success? I'm 24 years old, living in a studio apartment and getting uninvited from family dinners. That's not success. You're 24 years old, you have a degree in a growing field, and you've been building real skills while working with actual clients. The only reason you don't see that as success is because you're comparing yourself to Kevin's version of what success looks like. After we hung up, I spent the night staring at the ceiling, thinking about Jessica's words. She was right about one thing. I had been playing small, waiting for permission to be ambitious, seeking approval from people who had already decided I wasn't worth their time. Friday morning brought a new low point. I checked my email to find a response from one of the companies I'd applied to weeks earlier. It was the standard rejection template, professional and impersonal, but it arrived at exactly the wrong moment. I had applied for a junior marketing coordinator position, something well below my qualifications, and they had chosen someone else. I was lying on my bed, still in the pajamas I'd worn for 2 days straight, when my landlord knocked on the door. Mr. Hassan was a kind man who owned several properties in the area, but kindness didn't pay the bills. "Rachel, I need to talk to you about next month's rent," he said when I opened the door. My lease was up for renewal in 6 weeks, and I'd been putting off dealing with the paperwork because I couldn't decide if I wanted to stay in Phoenix or start over somewhere else. Now, looking at Mr. Hassan's apologetic expression, I realized the decision might be made for me. "The property management company is requiring a rent increase," he explained. "It's not my choice, but they're raising all the units in this complex by 30%. 30%. I did the math in my head and felt my chest tighten. Even with my sporadic freelance income, there was no way I could afford the new rate. "When do you need to know?" "End of next week. I'm sorry, Rachel. I know this is hard." After he left, I sat on my floor and looked around the tiny space. That had been my home for the past year. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The thought of having to move back in with my parents, especially now that I was apparently persona non grata, made me feel physically sick. I spent that afternoon walking around Tempe, trying to clear my head and figure out my next move. The ASU campus was mostly empty, summer session having ended the week before, and the familiar college town felt hollow and temporary. I found myself at the small park where Jessica and I used to study when the library was too crowded, sitting on the same bench where I'd first told her about my dreams of working for a major marketing firm. That's when I made the call that would change everything, though I didn't know it at the time. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Rachel Martinez. I was in your business communications class at Desert Mountain High School." Helen Rodriguez had been my favorite teacher, the one person who had seen potential in me when I couldn't see it myself. She'd retired from teaching the year after I graduated, but I'd kept her number in my phone like a talisman. "Rachel." "What?" "A wonderful surprise." "How are you, Mia?" Hearing her voice, warm and genuinely pleased, made my throat tight with emotion I hadn't expected. "I'm struggling, Mrs. Rodriguez. I'm really struggling, and I don't know what to do." We talked for an hour. I told her about college, about the job search, about Kevin's dismissal and my family's subsequent rejection. I told her about the Henderson Associates project, about the apartment situation, about feeling like I was proving Kevin right with every day that passed without a real breakthrough. Mrs. Rodriguez listened without interruption, making small sounds of understanding and encouragement. That reminded me why I'd trusted her with my dreams in the first place. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Rachel, do you remember what I told you when you were applying to colleges? You said I had an eye for marketing that couldn't be taught." "That's right. And do you remember what else I said?" I thought back to that conversation in her classroom, afternoon sunlight streaming through windows covered in student projects and motivational posters. You said that quiet confidence was a form of strength. Exactly. And what you're describing to me now isn't the story of someone who lacks potential. It's the story of someone who's been waiting for other people to give her permission to be excellent. Mrs. Rodriguez had a way of reframing situations that cut straight to the heart of things. But what if Kevin's right? What if I'm not built for success? Kevin is a real estate agent who judges success by how loudly someone can sell themselves. You're a strategist who builds things that work. Those are completely different skill sets, and his opinion of your abilities is worth exactly nothing. We talked about the Henderson Associates project, and Mrs. Rodriguez asked questions that helped me see it from a different angle. Instead of viewing it as a desperate attempt to prove myself, she helped me understand it as a demonstration of expertise that most people my age couldn't replicate. "Have you considered that maybe the traditional application process isn't designed for someone with your approach?" she asked. "Maybe instead of waiting for them to notice you, you need to make it impossible for them to ignore you." That evening, I returned to my apartment with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Mrs. Rodriguez was right. I had been waiting for permission, seeking approval from people who had already decided I wasn't worth their attention. Kevin's dismissal, my family's rejection, the string of job rejections, they were all symptoms of the same problem. I was playing by rules that were designed to keep people like me in supporting roles. But what if I stopped playing by those rules? I opened my laptop and looked at the Henderson Associates project with fresh eyes. What I saw wasn't a desperate attempt to prove myself to people who had already counted me out. What I saw was a comprehensive strategy that could genuinely help a company reach its goals, created by someone who understood their industry and their challenges. I spent the weekend refining the presentation, adding case studies from my freelance work and creating projections based on realistic engagement metrics. By Sunday evening, I had a 20-slide deck that demonstrated not just what Henderson Associates could achieve with proper digital strategy, but exactly how to get there. The plan I developed was ambitious but achievable. Instead of applying for an entry-level position and hoping someone would eventually notice my potential, I would present myself as the solution to problems they didn't even know they had. Monday morning, I dressed in the one professional outfit I owned, a navy blazer I'd bought for college presentations and black pants from Target, and drove to Henderson Associates' office in North Phoenix. I didn't have an appointment. I didn't have an introduction. I had something better, a solution to their biggest challenge and the confidence to present it. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, looked up when I walked through the glass doors. "Good morning. I'm Rachel Martinez, and I have a presentation for Michael Thompson regarding Henderson Associates' digital expansion strategy. I don't have an appointment, but I have something I think he'll want to see." It was the kind of bold move that Kevin would never understand, too unconventional for someone who believed success meant following established paths. But as I stood in that sleek lobby, holding a presentation that represented weeks of careful work and years of accumulated knowledge, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. I felt like someone who was built for success after all. The receptionist's name tag read Margaret, and she had the kind of steady gaze that suggested she'd seen every type of person walk through those glass doors. Corporate climbers, desperate job seekers, overconfident consultants. I probably looked like some combination of all three. Mr. Thompson is in meetings until 3 o'clock, Margaret said, checking her computer screen. But I can see if someone else might be available to speak with you about opportunities. Actually, this is specifically for Mr. Thompson. It's regarding a comprehensive digital strategy proposal that could significantly impact Henderson Associates' Q4 revenue projections. I kept my voice steady, professional, the way Mrs. Rodriguez had taught me to speak when presenting to school board members during my high school internship. Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. This clearly wasn't the typical job inquiry she was used to handling. And you said your name was Rachel Martinez? That's correct. I don't have an appointment, but I believe Mr. Thompson will want to see this presentation today, rather than waiting for a scheduled meeting next week. There was something about the specificity of my request that seemed to shift Margaret's assessment of the situation. She picked up her phone and had a brief, quiet conversation with someone on the other end. After a moment, she hung up and looked at me again. Mr. Thompson's assistant says he can spare 15 minutes at 2:30. If you're willing to wait, but I should warn you, he's very particular about his time. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 10:45 a.m. I'll wait. The Henderson Associates lobby was designed to impress, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Phoenix Mountains, and sleek furniture that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I settled into one of the leather chairs with my laptop and used the time to review my presentation one final time, making small adjustments to the slides and practicing my talking points. Around noon, I watched a steady stream of employees return from lunch, and I started to recognize the workplace hierarchy just from observing interactions in the lobby. There were the senior executives who moved with purpose and acknowledged Margaret with brief nods, the mid-level managers who stopped to chat and seemed comfortable in the space, and the younger employees who hurried through with their eyes down, clearly still learning the unspoken rules of corporate culture. That's when I saw her. Stephanie walked through the lobby at 12:45, wearing a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. She was talking animatedly on her phone about client deliverables and timeline adjustments, using the kind of corporate jargon that had always seemed like a foreign language to me. She didn't notice me sitting in the corner, which wasn't surprising. At family gatherings, Stephanie had a talent for looking right through me, not out of malice, but out of genuine disinterest. Watching her navigate the office space with such obvious familiarity made my stomach clench with doubt. This was her territory, her world. What was I doing here, thinking I could waltz in with a PowerPoint presentation and somehow compete with people who had been building their careers in this environment for years? I thought about Kevin's words from the barbecue. Some people just aren't built for it. The world needs followers too. Sitting in that expensive lobby, surrounded by people in expensive clothes discussing expensive projects, I could feel the truth of his assessment settling over me like a heavy blanket. But then I remembered something Mrs. Rodriguez had said during our phone conversation. Rachel, the difference between leaders and followers isn't confidence or connections. It's the willingness to see problems that other people ignore and the skills to solve them. I opened my laptop and looked at my presentation one more time. The slides weren't flashy, but they were thorough. The analysis wasn't revolutionary, but it was accurate. The solutions I'd proposed weren't groundbreaking, but they were practical and achievable. Most importantly, they were based on real understanding of Henderson and Associates challenges, not generic consulting advice. At 2:25, Margaret approached my chair. Mr. Thompson is ready to see you now. Conference room B, just down the hall to your right. Michael Thompson was not what I expected. Instead of the intimidating executive I'd imagined, he was a man in his late 40s with tired eyes and the slightly rumpled appearance of someone who'd been putting out fires all day. He stood when I entered the conference room, extending his hand with a polite but skeptical smile. Ms. Martinez, I understand you have a presentation for me regarding our digital strategy. Thank you for making time to see me, Mr. Thompson. I know your schedule is packed, so I'll get right to the point. I connected my laptop to the conference room's display system, grateful for the hours I'd spent practicing this exact moment in my apartment. Before we begin, can you tell me a little about your background? Are you with a consulting firm? I'm an independent digital marketing strategist. I have a degree in marketing from ASU, and I've been working with small and medium-sized businesses in the Phoenix area to develop their online presence and content strategies. I could see the moment when Michael's expectations shifted. Independent strategist was code for unemployed recent graduate, and his body language became noticeably more polite, but less engaged. This was the part where most people would write me off, and I knew I had maybe 2 minutes to change his mind. Mr. Thompson, I'm going to show you something that might surprise you. This is your company's current digital footprint compared to your 3 main competitors. I clicked to the first slide, which displayed a side-by-side comparison of social media engagement rates, website traffic estimates, and content frequency across 4 companies in their market segment. The silence that followed was exactly what I'd hoped for. Henderson Associates was dead last in every category. Where did you get this data? Michael asked, leaning forward in his chair. Publicly available sources. Social media insights, SEMrush for website analytics, industry reports from the Phoenix Business Journal. The information is all out there if you know where to look for it. I clicked to the next slide, which showed projected revenue impact based on industry benchmarks for digital engagement. Based on your current client roster and average project values, Henderson Associates is leaving approximately $3 million annually on the table by not capitalizing on digital marketing opportunities. Michael's skeptical expression was shifting into something that looked like genuine interest. That seems like a significant figure. It is, but it's also conservative. I based these projections on the lower end of industry performance metrics. Companies similar to yours that have implemented comprehensive digital strategies have seen revenue increases of 25 to 40% within the first year. For the next 10 minutes, I walked Michael through my analysis of Henderson & Associates' current digital presence, highlighting specific areas where they were underperforming and explaining exactly why those gaps mattered in today's market. I showed him examples of content that was working for their competitors, demonstrated how their current social media strategy was actually hurting their brand perception, and outlined the demographic shifts that were making digital engagement essential for B2B companies in their industry. This is very thorough, Michael said when I paused between sections. How long did this analysis take you? About 2 weeks of research and strategy development, but I should mention that I've been studying your company for longer than that. I'm familiar with your client base, your market position, and your growth trajectory. What prompted this level of research? Are you looking for a position with Henderson & Associates? This was the moment I'd been preparing for, the question that would determine whether this presentation led to an opportunity or a polite dismissal. Mr. Thompson, I'm looking to solve a problem that I believe is limiting your company's growth potential. Whether that leads to a position or a consulting relationship, I'm more interested in demonstrating value than in following traditional application processes. I clicked to the next section of slides, which outlined my proposed digital strategy implementation plan. This is what Henderson & Associates could achieve with a coordinated digital marketing approach. I've broken it down into 90-day phases, with specific deliverables and measurable outcomes for each phase. The plan I'd developed was comprehensive, but realistic. Phase 1 focused on social media optimization and content creation systems. Phase 2 introduced video marketing and LinkedIn lead generation campaigns. Phase 3 implemented advanced analytics and automated nurturing sequences for prospect conversion. Each phase builds on the previous one, I explained, but they're designed to generate measurable results within 30 days of implementation. You're not waiting months to see whether the strategy is working. Michael was taking notes now, asking specific questions about timelines and resource requirements. This level of strategy development, what would something like this typically cost if we were working with a consulting firm? A full digital transformation project like this would typically run between $50,000 and $80,000 for the first year, not including ongoing management fees. Most consulting firms would also require a 6-month minimum commitment before you'd see comprehensive results. And what are you proposing? This was the moment where I either positioned myself as a valuable partner or priced myself out of consideration. I'm proposing a different approach. Give me 60 days to implement phase 1 of this strategy. If you don't see measurable improvement in your digital engagement and lead generation within that time frame, you owe me nothing. If the results meet or exceed the projections I've outlined, we discuss a longer-term arrangement. Michael set down his pen and looked at me directly. Ms. Martinez, this is an unusual proposal. We don't typically work with independent contractors on strategic initiatives. I understand that, but you also don't typically have someone walk into your office with a complete analysis of your competitive disadvantages and a detailed plan to address them. I clicked to my final slide, which showed projected quarterly revenue impact if Henderson Associates implemented the digital strategy versus if they continued with their current approach. The way I see it, Mr. Thompson, you have 3 options. You can continue doing what you're currently doing and watch your competitors gain market share in the digital space. You can hire a traditional consulting firm and spend 6 months and substantial budget on strategy development before you see results. Or you can let me prove that this approach works with minimal risk and maximum accountability. The conference room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Michael was studying my final slide, and I could see him running calculations in his head. I'm going to need to discuss this with my team, he said finally. This isn't the kind of decision I can make unilaterally. Of course, I understand this represents a significant shift in how you approach digital marketing. Can you leave me a copy of this presentation? I'd like to review it more thoroughly and share it with our senior management team. I handed him a USB drive that contained not just the presentation, but also supplementary research documents and case studies from my freelance work. Everything you need is on there, including examples of similar strategies I've implemented for other clients. As I packed up my laptop, Michael walked me toward the conference room door. Ms. Martinez, can I ask you something? This level of analysis, this depth of strategy development, why Henderson Associates? What made you choose our company for this kind of investment of time and effort? It was a fair question, and one I'd anticipated. The honest answer involved Stephanie, Kevin, and my desire to prove something to people who'd written me off. But the professional answer was equally true. Henderson Associates has a strong reputation and a solid client base, but you're at a critical inflection point. Your industry is shifting toward digital-first client acquisition, and companies that don't adapt are going to lose market share to more agile competitors. I saw an opportunity to help the established firm leverage their existing strengths while building new capabilities. Michael nodded slowly. I'll be in touch within the next week. Either way, I want you to know that this was an impressive presentation. You clearly understand our business in ways that most consultants don't. Walking back through the lobby, I felt a strange combination of exhaustion and exhilaration. I'd done something that 6 months ago would have seemed impossible. I'd walked into a major company and presented a professional strategy that was taken seriously by a senior executive. Whether it led to an opportunity remained to be seen, but I'd proven something important to myself. Margaret looked up as I passed her desk. How did it go? Time will tell, I said. But thank you for making it possible. Good luck, honey. For what it's worth, I've seen a lot of people come through here over the years, and you presented yourself very professionally. Driving home through Phoenix traffic, I replayed the meeting in my head, analyzing every question Michael had asked and every response I'd given. There were things I could have explained better, Slides I could have refined, points I should have emphasized more strongly. But overall, I felt like I'd represented myself and my ideas clearly and confidently. That evening, I called Mrs. Rodriguez to update her on the presentation. She listened to my recap with the kind of focused attention that made me remember why I'd trusted her with my dreams in high school. "Rachel, regardless of what happens with this particular opportunity, you just did something that most people your age would never attempt. You identified a problem, developed a comprehensive solution, and presented it directly to decision makers. That takes courage and professional maturity. I keep wondering if I should have approached it differently. Maybe gone through normal application channels, tried to get an entry-level position first, and spent months or years trying to work your way up to a level where anyone would listen to your strategic ideas? Rachel, you took control of the narrative. You showed them what you're capable of instead of asking them to imagine it." Over the next few days, I tried to return to normal routines while waiting for Michael's response. I worked on my existing freelance projects, responded to new client inquiries, and began researching other companies that might benefit from similar strategic approaches. But it was hard to concentrate when I knew that my entire future might be determined by a conversation happening in a conference room somewhere in North Phoenix. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Rachel, this is Michael Thompson from Henderson Associates. Do you have a few minutes?" "To talk?" My heart started beating faster, but I kept my voice steady. "Of course, Mr. Thompson. What can I do for you?" "I presented your strategy to our senior management team yesterday, and I'm calling with an offer. But it's not exactly what you proposed." I felt my stomach drop. "I understand. We'd like to bring you on as a contract digital strategy coordinator to implement the plan you outlined. It would be a 3-month trial period with the possibility of extension based on performance. The compensation would be $65,000 annually, prorated for the contract period." I sat down heavily on my couch, trying to process what I was hearing. It wasn't the 60-day trial I'd proposed, but it was a real offer from a real company for real money. "Mr. Thompson, that's a generous offer. Can I ask what convinced your team to move forward?" "Honestly, your analysis was more thorough than anything we've seen from firms we've paid significant consulting fees, and your approach to measurable outcomes resonated with our leadership team. We've been burned by consultants who promised results and delivered reports. When would you need an answer?" "End of the week would be ideal. We'd like to start the first phase of implementation as soon as possible." After we hung up, I sat in my tiny apartment and looked around at the space I'd been afraid of losing just weeks earlier. Everything had changed so quickly that I hadn't had time to process what it meant. I was going to be working at Henderson Associates, the same company where Stephanie had been climbing the corporate ladder for 5 years, implementing strategies that I'd developed independently. I thought about calling Jessica to share the news, but something held me back. This felt too fragile, too new to celebrate yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and began researching everything I could find about Henderson Associates' internal culture, their current projects, and their competitive landscape. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. My first day at Henderson Associates was scheduled for the following Monday, which gave me exactly 4 days to prepare for what would either be the opportunity of a lifetime or a spectacular public failure. I spent those days creating detailed project timelines, researching the company's existing clients, and developing content templates that could be implemented immediately. What I didn't do was tell my family about the job. The decision felt both petty and necessary. Kevin's dismissal at the barbecue, followed by my mother's request to give them space, had created a strange liberation from the need to seek their approval or share my victories. For the first time in my adult life, I was about to embark on something significant without their input, judgment, or interference. I did call Jessica, who screamed so loudly over the phone that I had to hold the device away from my ear. Rachel Martinez, I cannot believe you didn't call me the second you got off the phone with them. This is huge. This is exactly what you've been working toward. It's a 3-month contract, I reminded her. It's not like they offered me a permanent executive position. Are you kidding me? You walked into a company where you had no connections, presented a strategy you developed independently, and convinced them to hire you on the spot. That's not luck. That's competence. Jessica had a way of cutting through my tendency toward self-doubt, but even her enthusiasm couldn't completely quiet the voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like Kevin. What if I couldn't deliver on the promises I'd made? What if my analysis was wrong? What if I was about to prove, very publicly, that I really wasn't built for success? Monday morning arrived with typical Phoenix brutality, the temperature already climbing toward triple digits before 8 a.m. I dressed carefully in the navy blazer and black pants that had served me well for the presentation, adding a blue silk scarf I'd bought years earlier for college career fairs but never had occasion to wear. The Henderson Associates building looked different when I arrived as an employee rather than an uninvited visitor. Margaret smiled when she saw me approach her desk. "First day. How are you feeling?" "Nervous but ready," I admitted. "Mr. Thompson asked me to bring you up to his office when you arrived. He wants to introduce you to the team before you get started." The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt longer than it should have, and I found myself running through the talking points. I'd prepared for meeting my new colleagues, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened when the elevator doors opened. Stephanie was standing directly in front of the elevator, looking down at her phone while waiting for the doors to open. She glanced up automatically when she heard the chime, and her expression shifted through several stages of confusion before settling on something that looked like mild panic. "Rachel? What are you doing here?" "I'm starting work today. Digital Strategy Coordinator position." The silence that followed was filled with the ambient sounds of office life around us. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the hum of conversations from nearby cubicles. Stephanie's face went through a series of micro-expressions that I could read like subtitles. Surprise, confusion, concern, and finally something that looked like embarrassment. "I didn't know you had applied here," she said carefully. "I didn't apply in the traditional sense. I presented a strategic proposal to Michael Thompson last week." "Michael Thompson? You presented to the regional director?" Before I could respond, Michael himself appeared in the hallway, approaching with the purposeful stride of someone keeping to a tight schedule. "Rachel, perfect timing. I see you've already run into Stephanie. I understand you two know each other." The awkwardness of the moment was compounded by the fact that neither Stephanie nor I had explained the nature of our relationship. We stood there like characters in a workplace sitcom, waiting for someone else to provide context that would make the situation make sense. "Stephanie is my sister-in-law," I said finally. "She's married to my brother." Michael's eyebrows rose slightly, and I could see him making mental calculations about the implications of hiring someone connected to an existing employee. "I see. Well, that's an interesting coincidence. Stephanie, Rachel will be working on our digital strategy implementation. I'm sure you'll be able to provide helpful insights about our company culture." Stephanie nodded, but her smile looked strained. "Of course. I'm sure Rachel will do great things here." The rest of the morning was a blur of introductions, office, tours, and orientation meetings. Michael walked me through the company's organizational structure, introduced me to key team members, and provided access to the systems and platforms I'd need for the digital strategy implementation. Everyone was professional and welcoming, but I could feel the undercurrent of curiosity about my unconventional hiring process. Around 11 a.m., I was settling into the temporary office space that had been assigned to me when Stephanie appeared in my doorway. "Do you have a minute to talk?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk, and she sat down with the careful posture of someone who was choosing her words deliberately. "Rachel, I want you to know that I had nothing to do with the family situation. What happened at the Barbecue, and afterward with your mom calling you. That was all, Kevin. I didn't ask for you to be excluded from family events. It was an apology of sorts, though it came with the subtle implication that she'd been a passive observer rather than an active participant in my family's decision to distance themselves from me. I appreciate you saying that, Stephanie. I also want you to know that I won't let our family dynamics affect our working relationship. I understand you earned this position based on your qualifications, and I respect that. There was something about the way she phrased it. I won't let our family dynamics affect our working relationship, that suggested she saw herself as the established employee extending grace to the new hire, rather than recognizing that my presence at Henderson Associates was the result of my own initiative and expertise. Thank you. I'm here to do good work, and I hope we can maintain a professional relationship regardless of what's happening with Kevin and the family. Stephanie nodded and stood to leave, but she paused at the doorway. Rachel, can I ask you something? How did you even know about Henderson and Associates? I mean, what made you choose this company specifically? It was the question I'd been dreading, the one that would reveal either my strategic research or my personal motivations, depending on how I chose to answer it. I've been studying digital marketing strategies across different industries, and Henderson and Associates came up repeatedly as a company with strong fundamentals but untapped potential in the digital space. The opportunity to help an established firm modernize their approach was exactly the kind of challenge I was looking for. It was a diplomatic answer that was technically true while avoiding the more complicated reality of my motivations. Stephanie seemed satisfied with the explanation, or at least willing to accept it, and she left me to continue settling into my new workspace. The next few weeks established a routine that felt both surreal and surprisingly natural. I arrived at the office each morning with a clear sense of purpose, implementing the digital strategy phases I'd outlined in my presentation. The work was exactly what I'd hoped for, challenging, creative, and measurable in ways that made every day feel productive. The first phase of my strategy focused on social media optimization and content creation systems. I spent my days analyzing Henderson and Associates' existing online presence, developing content calendars, and creating templates that other team members could use to maintain consistent messaging across platforms. Within 2 weeks, the company's social media engagement rates had increased by 180%, and new follower acquisition was up 240%. More importantly, the increased online visibility was translating into actual business results. 3 new client inquiries came directly through social media channels that had been essentially dormant before my arrival. Michael Thompson made a point of mentioning these results in the weekly team meetings, and I could see skeptical colleagues beginning to view my work with genuine interest rather than polite curiosity. But the professional success was complicated by the strange dynamics of working in the same office as Stephanie. She was unfailingly professional in our interactions, but there was an underlying tension that neither of us acknowledged directly. I could feel her watching my work, evaluating my performance, perhaps looking for evidence that my success was temporary or undeserved. The situation became more complex when I realized that my digital strategy work was beginning to overlap with Stephanie's responsibilities in marketing coordination. The content I was creating for social media needed to align with the broader marketing campaigns she was managing, and the lead generation systems I was implementing required coordination with her client communication processes. Initially, these intersections were handled through brief professional exchanges of information. But as my strategies began generating measurable results, Stephanie's attitude shifted in ways that were subtle but noticeable. She began asking more detailed questions about my methods, requesting copies of reports and analytics that weren't directly related to her work, and making suggestions for modifications to my strategies that seemed designed more to assert authority than to improve outcomes. The tension came to a head during a team meeting in early October. Michael Thompson was reviewing the quarterly performance metrics, and my digital strategy implementation was featured prominently in the positive results he was highlighting. Rachel's work on our social media presence and content marketing has exceeded our initial projections, Michael announced to the assembled team. We're seeing a 35% increase in qualified leads directly attributable to the digital channels she's developed, and our brand visibility metrics have improved across all platforms. I felt a flush of pride at the public recognition, but I also noticed Stephanie's expression tighten almost imperceptibly. After the meeting, she approached me with what appeared to be a friendly smile, but felt like something else entirely. Rachel, congratulations on the great results. I was wondering if we could schedule some time to discuss how your digital strategies might be integrated with the traditional marketing campaigns I'm managing. I think there could be some synergies we're missing. The word synergies in corporate settings was often code for boundary negotiations, and I suspected this conversation would be more about establishing hierarchy than improving collaboration. We met the following afternoon in one of the smaller conference rooms. Stephanie had prepared a detailed presentation about her current marketing projects and how they might be enhanced by incorporating elements of my digital strategy. But, as she walked through her slides, it became clear that what she was proposing wasn't integration so much as absorption. I think it would be more efficient if the social media content creation was coordinated through my marketing workflow, she explained. That way we can ensure consistency with our broader branding initiatives and avoid any potential messaging conflicts. I listened carefully, taking notes and asking clarifying questions, but underneath my professional demeanor, I was recognizing a familiar pattern. This was the same dynamic that had played out at family gatherings for years. Stephanie, positioning herself as the coordinator and authority figure while relegating me to a supporting role. I appreciate the suggestion, I said when she finished her presentation, but I think the current structure is working well. The digital strategy operates most effectively when it can respond quickly to real-time engagement and trending topics. Routing everything through additional approval processes might slow down our response time and reduce the authenticity that's driving our current results. Stephanie's smile became more forced. I'm not suggesting additional approval processes. I'm suggesting coordination to maximize impact. Right now, our digital channels are generating measurable leads and engagement because they're able to maintain a consistent voice and respond dynamically to our audience. I'm concerned that adding additional layers of coordination might compromise those results. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Stephanie presenting increasingly elaborate justifications for why my work should be integrated into her oversight, and me politely but firmly explaining why the current structure was producing better outcomes. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that neither of us had convinced the other, but we'd established that this wasn't going to be resolved through informal discussion. That evening, I stayed late in the office to work on a comprehensive report, documenting the performance metrics and methodologies behind my digital strategy work. If Stephanie was going to challenge my autonomy through official channels, I wanted to be prepared with concrete evidence of what was working and why. As I was gathering my materials to leave around 8 p.m., I noticed that several lights were still on in other parts of the office. Henderson Associates had a culture of long hours, particularly among the senior staff who were managing multiple client accounts. I was walking toward the elevator when I heard voices coming from Michael Thompson's office. I wasn't intentionally eavesdropping, but the voices were loud enough to hear from the hallway, and I recognized both speakers immediately. Stephanie was in Michael's office, and their conversation was clearly about me. I'm just concerned that we might be missing opportunities for synergy, Stephanie was saying. Rachel's work is impressive, but I think it could be even more effective if it was coordinated with our existing marketing infrastructure. The results speak for themselves, Michael replied. Her strategies are generating leads and engagement at rates we haven't seen before. I'm not inclined to fix something that isn't broken. I'm not suggesting we fix anything. I'm suggesting we optimize. I have 5 years of experience with this company's clients and market position. Rachel has been here 6 weeks. There's value in institutional knowledge. I stood frozen in the hallway, not wanting to interrupt but unable to walk away without being obvious about leaving. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Stephanie making increasingly elaborate arguments for why my work should be coordinated through her oversight. Michael's responses were diplomatic but firm. He acknowledged Stephanie's experience and contributions while maintaining that my digital strategy work was producing results that justified its current structure. But I could hear the strain in his voice, the fatigue of a manager dealing with office politics when he'd rather be focusing on business outcomes. I waited until I heard chairs moving and the sounds of the meeting ending before walking quickly toward the elevator. But as I waited for the doors to open, I realized that this conflict wasn't going to resolve itself through good intentions and professional courtesy. Stephanie saw my success as a challenge to her authority and position within the company. She wasn't wrong to feel threatened. My work was getting attention and recognition that had previously been directed toward her marketing efforts. But her response wasn't to collaborate or learn from new approaches. It was to assert control and establish hierarchy. The elevator arrived, and as the doors closed behind me, I thought about Kevin's words from the barbecue. Some people just aren't built for success. The world needs followers too. He'd meant those words as a dismissal, a way of putting me in my place and keeping me there. But maybe the real truth was simpler. Some people were threatened by others' success because it forced them to confront the limitations of their own approach. Kevin's dismissal hadn't been about my capabilities. It had been about his need to maintain a hierarchy where he was the successful one and I was the supporting character. Now Stephanie was doing the same thing, trying to reframe my independent success as something that needed her coordination and oversight. But this time, I wasn't going to nod and walk away. This time, I had documentation, results, and the backing of a supervisor who valued outcomes over office politics. Driving home through the Phoenix evening traffic, I felt something I hadn't experienced since that first presentation to Michael Thompson. I felt ready for a fight. The next morning brought an email that changed everything, though I didn't realize it at first. Michael Thompson had sent a message to all department heads announcing a special presentation from corporate headquarters scheduled for the following week. Henderson Associates was expanding their digital services division, and regional leadership would be visiting to discuss new organizational structures and growth opportunities. I was reviewing the quarterly analytics reports when my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Girl, you need to see what your brother just posted on Facebook. Screenshot incoming." The image she sent made my stomach drop. Kevin had shared a post from some real estate motivational page with his own commentary added. "Success isn't about luck or being in the right place at the right time. It's about having the skills and drive to create your own opportunities. Some people get this, others spend their whole lives making excuses." The timing felt deliberate, like he'd somehow learned about my position at Henderson Associates and needed to diminish it before anyone could suggest his assessment of my potential had been wrong. But what bothered me more than Kevin's predictable response was my own reaction to it. 6 months ago, that post would have sent me spiraling into self-doubt. Now, it just felt like noise from someone who had never bothered to understand what I was actually capable of. I was still thinking about Kevin's post when Margaret called my extension around 2 p.m. "Rachel, Mr. Thompson would like to see you in his office when you have a moment." Michael's office had floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Phoenix skyline, and he was standing at one of them when I knocked on his open door. "Come in, Rachel. Close the door behind you, please." That instruction immediately shifted my mental state from casual workplace conversation to something more serious. I sat in one of the chairs facing his desk while he remained standing, looking out at the city. "I had an interesting conversation yesterday evening," he began, still facing the window, "about integration and coordination and maximizing synergies, He turned to face me, and his expression was unreadable. I understand there have been some discussions about restructuring how our digital strategy work is managed. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. If you're referring to my conversation with Stephanie about coordination, yes. We discussed different approaches to managing the digital marketing workflow. Rachel, I want you to understand something about this company. Henderson Associates has been successful for 15 years because we've always prioritized results over internal politics. When someone demonstrates exceptional performance, we don't bury it under layers of bureaucracy to make other people feel more comfortable. He sat down across from me, and his tone shifted from formal to conversational. Your work over the past 8 weeks has been outstanding. Not just good, not just meeting expectations, but genuinely exceptional. The digital strategy you've implemented has generated more qualified leads than we typically see in a full quarter, and our brand recognition metrics have improved dramatically. I felt a flush of pride, but also a growing sense of anticipation. This conversation was heading somewhere, and I couldn't predict whether it would be positive or problematic. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I've enjoyed the work tremendously, and I'm glad the results are meeting your expectations. They're exceeding our expectations, which brings me to why I asked you here today. He leaned back in his chair, studying my face. The corporate visit next week isn't just about expansion planning. We're being considered for designation as a flagship office for Henderson Associates' new digital services division. If that happens, this location would become the regional hub for digital marketing strategy across the southwestern market. My heart started beating faster, though I wasn't sure whether from excitement or anxiety. That sounds like a significant opportunity for the company. It is. And it would require someone to lead the digital services team, someone who understands both the strategic and operational aspects of what we're building here. He paused, and I could see him choosing his words carefully. Rachel, I'm recommending you for the position of Regional Director of Digital Strategy. The words hit me like a physical force. Regional Director. The same level as Michael's current position, responsible for digital strategy across multiple offices and market segments. It was beyond anything I'd imagined when I first walked into this building with my laptop and a presentation I'd created in my studio apartment. Mr. Thompson, I'm honored that you would consider me for such a significant role. But I've only been here 2 months, and I don't have traditional management experience. Traditional management experience is exactly what we don't need for this position. We need someone who understands how digital marketing actually works, who can implement strategies that generate measurable results, and who can build systems that other offices can replicate. You've demonstrated all of those capabilities. Michael stood up and walked back to the window, and I could see him organizing his thoughts. Rachel, there's something else you should know. This recommendation isn't just based on your performance here. Corporate has been reviewing the strategies you've implemented, and they've been comparing our results to other offices across the network. Your work isn't just exceeding our local benchmarks, it's setting new standards for the entire company. The magnitude of what he was telling me was difficult to process. I'd been focused on proving myself in this one office, demonstrating that I could deliver on the promises I'd made in my initial presentation. I hadn't considered that my work was being evaluated at a corporate level, or that it might have implications beyond Henderson Associates' Phoenix location. If I were to accept this position, what would it involve? You'd be responsible for developing and implementing digital marketing strategies across 6 offices in Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. You'd have a team of 12 digital marketing specialists reporting to you, and you'd be working directly with corporate leadership to establish best practices for the entire network. Michael returned to his chair and pulled out a folder that had been sitting on his desk. This is a preliminary job description and compensation package. Obviously, everything is contingent on corporate approval, but I wanted you to have time to review the details before next week's presentation. I opened the folder and immediately focused on the compensation figure at the top of the page. The Salary was more than double what I'd been earning on the 3-month contract, with performance bonuses that could increase it by another 40%. But beyond the numbers, the job description outlined responsibilities that would challenge everything. I thought I knew about my own capabilities. Mr. Thompson, this is an incredible opportunity, but I have to ask about the internal dynamics. How would this affect my working relationship with other team members? His expression became more serious. Rachel, I'm going to be direct with you. Not everyone is going to be comfortable with this promotion. You'd be moving into a leadership role ahead of people who have been with the company longer and who might feel that traditional seniority should have been considered. I thought about Stephanie's efforts to coordinate my work through her oversight, about the careful way she'd been positioning herself as the experienced employee extending guidance to the new hire. A promotion like this would fundamentally alter that dynamic, making me her supervisor rather than her peer. Have you discussed this possibility with the rest of the team? Not yet. I wanted to get your reaction first, and I wanted to give you time to consider whether you're interested in the position before we move forward with any announcements. I looked down at the job description again, scanning through responsibilities that included strategic planning, team leadership, budget, management, and cross-regional coordination. 6 months ago, I'd been living in a studio apartment, questioning whether I was cut out for professional success. Now, I was being offered a director-level position at a company I'd approached through cold outreach. Can I have until Friday to give you an answer? Of course. Take whatever time you need to think it through. Walking back to my office, I felt like I was moving through a different reality than the one I'd inhabited that morning. The hallway looked the same. The sounds of office activity were familiar, but everything felt transformed by the possibility that had just been presented to me. I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to focus on my current projects, but my mind kept returning to the conversation with Michael, Regional Director of Digital Strategy. It was a title that commanded respect, that opened doors, that proved definitively that Kevin's assessment of my potential had been spectacularly wrong. That evening, I called Mrs. Rodriguez. Rachel, you sound different. What's happened? I told her about the job offer, about the corporate expansion, about the possibility of leading a regional team. Mrs. Rodriguez listened without interruption, making small sounds of encouragement and pride that reminded me why I'd sought her guidance during the darkest period of my job search. How do you feel about it? She asked when I finished explaining the details. Terrified and excited in equal measure. This is beyond anything I imagined when I first walked into Henderson Associates, but I keep wondering if I'm ready for this level of responsibility. Rachel, do you remember what I told you about quiet confidence being a form of strength? I do. This opportunity exists because you demonstrated that strength. You identified problems, developed solutions, and implemented strategies that generated results. Those aren't lucky accidents. They're evidence of competence and leadership. We talked for another hour about the practical considerations of the position, the challenges of managing people who might resent my rapid advancement, and the importance of staying focused on results rather than getting distracted by office politics. Whatever you decide, Mrs. Rodriguez said before we hung up, make sure it's based on what you know you can accomplish, not on what other people think you deserve. Friday morning, I walked into Michael's office with my decision. I'd like to accept the position, Mr. Thompson. I believe I can deliver the results you're looking for, and I'm excited about the opportunity to build something significant. Michael smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression I'd seen from him all week. Outstanding. I'll inform corporate this afternoon, and we'll make the announcement to the team on Monday, after the leadership presentations. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. I spent Saturday researching the other Henderson Associates offices that would be part of my regional territory, analyzing their current digital presence and identifying opportunities for improvement. Sunday was devoted to organizing my thoughts about team structure, resource allocation, and implementation timelines for the expanded role. Monday arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that made Phoenix almost pleasant. The corporate leadership team consisted of 3 executives from the company's headquarters in Dallas, and they conducted individual meetings with key staff members throughout the morning before the full team presentation in the afternoon. My meeting with the regional vice president, a woman named Catherine Walsh, lasted 90 minutes and covered everything from my strategic philosophy to my plans for scaling digital services across multiple markets. Catherine was direct, thorough, and clearly someone who valued competence over diplomacy. "Rachel, Michael has shared your performance metrics with us and they're impressive, but metrics are backward-looking. I'm more interested in your vision for where digital marketing is heading and how Henderson Associates can position itself ahead of industry trends." I walked her through my analysis of emerging platforms, changing client expectations, and the integration of artificial intelligence into marketing automation. The conversation felt less like an interview and more like a strategic planning session, with Catherine asking detailed questions about implementation timelines and resource requirements. "One final question," Catherine said as our meeting concluded. "You're being considered for a significant leadership role at a relatively early stage in your career. How do you plan to manage the interpersonal dynamics that might arise from that situation?" I'd been preparing for this question all weekend. I believe leadership is earned through results, not seniority. My focus will be on helping every team member succeed by providing clear direction, appropriate resources, and recognition for good work. People who are committed to achieving excellent outcomes tend to respond well to that approach, regardless of traditional hierarchies. The full team presentation began at 2 p.m. in Henderson Associates' main conference room. Catherine Walsh stood at the front of the room, outlining the company's expansion plans and the opportunities for growth in digital services. The entire staff was present, including support personnel and administrative team members who rarely attended strategic planning meetings. Henderson Associates Phoenix has been selected as the flagship location for our new digital services division, Catherine announced. This designation recognizes the exceptional work that's been accomplished here and positions this office as a model for our entire network. I could feel eyes turning toward me as Catherine spoke about digital strategy implementation and measurable results. Stephanie was sitting 3 seats to my left, and though I couldn't see her expression, I could sense her tension. Effective. Immediately, we're establishing a new position to lead this initiative. Rachel Martinez has been promoted to Regional Director of Digital Strategy, with responsibility for digital services across our southwestern region. The silence that followed felt enormous. Then Michael Thompson began clapping, followed by several other team members, and eventually the entire room joined in polite applause. I stood to acknowledge the recognition, making brief eye contact with colleagues who looked variously surprised, impressed, and concerned. After the presentation, people approached me with congratulations and questions about what the new structure would mean for their roles. Most interactions were genuinely positive, but I noticed that Stephanie had left the conference room immediately after Catherine finished speaking. I found her in the break room 20 minutes later, standing at the coffee machine with her back to the room. "Stephanie, do you have a minute to talk?" She turned around, and her expression was carefully neutral. "Congratulations on the promotion, Rachel. I'm sure you'll do great things in the new role. I hope we can continue working together effectively. I value your experience with the company and your knowledge of our client relationships." Stephanie nodded, but her smile looked strained. "Of course. I'm committed to supporting the team's success." The conversation that followed was brief and diplomatically worded, but underneath the professional courtesy, we both understood that our dynamic had fundamentally shifted. I was no longer the family member who'd been written off as lacking ambition. I was her supervisor, responsible for evaluating her performance and directing her work. That evening, I sat in my apartment, now equipped with a proper desk and ergonomic chair that reflected my improved financial situation, and thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 6 months ago, Kevin had looked me in the eye and declared that I would never be successful, that some people just weren't built for achievement. Tomorrow, I would begin my role as Regional Director of Digital Strategy for Henderson Associates, leading a team responsible for digital marketing across 3 states. The irony wasn't lost on me that Stephanie would be among the people reporting to my oversight, or that Kevin's wife would now be taking direction from the sister-in-law he'd dismissed as a perpetual underachiever. I thought about calling my family to share the news, but something held me back. This success belonged to me in ways that felt too important to dilute with their reactions, whether positive or negative. I'd built this opportunity through my own initiative, proven myself through my own work, and earned recognition through my own competence. Instead, I called Mrs. Rodriguez. "Rachel, I can hear the pride in your voice. Tell me everything." I described the promotion, the new responsibilities, and the corporate recognition. I realized that this moment represented more than professional advancement. It was validation of a different approach to success, one based on quiet competence rather than loud self-promotion, strategic thinking rather than political maneuvering. "Mrs. Rodriguez, do you remember when you told me that quiet confidence was a form of strength?" "I do. I finally understand what you meant. All those years, I thought I needed to be louder, more aggressive, more like Kevin. But the traits that made me different were actually the ones that made me effective. Rachel, you've always had the capacity for leadership. You just needed the right environment to demonstrate it." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and began outlining plans for my first week as regional director. There were team meetings to schedule, strategy sessions to plan, and performance metrics to establish. But underneath the practical preparations, I felt something I'd never experienced before: complete confidence in my own capabilities. Kevin had been wrong about me, but he'd also been wrong about the nature of success itself. He'd equated achievement with dominance, competence with volume, leadership with self-promotion. But real success, the kind that created lasting value and earned genuine respect, was quieter and more substantial than his version had ever been. The phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Regional Director Rachel Martinez has a nice ring to it. When do we celebrate?" I smiled, thinking about how much had changed since that afternoon at my parents' barbecue when I'd nodded silently and walked away from Kevin's dismissal. Tomorrow I would begin a new chapter that proved definitively that some people aren't just built for success, they're built to redefine what success looks like. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.